All eyes on telecommunications provider MTN as it makes a 50 billion naira settlement claim to the federal government coffers in a rather different twist from the expected 780 billion naira fine on MTN by the Nigerian government. Could anyone tell us if there is an untold story behind these high-stake and high-level negotiations? Welcome to Question Time. I'm Benga Ashiru. You may also join in these conversations by sending us your comments on our various social media platforms showing on your screen. Who approved the down payment of 50 billion naira by MTN, and why did the federal government's negotiating team eagerly accepted an out-of-court settlement when all odds seemed to be in its favor? Why was the Minister of Communications not part of the negotiations? Is the Nigerian government's acceptance of a 50 billion naira down payment from MTN not a compromise taken too far? Perhaps many Nigerians might not just be comfortable with the air of secrecy that trailed the deal. In a bid to set the record straight, Channels TV caught up with the Minister of Communications, Honorable Adebayo, at the Digital Bridge Institute in Lagos. The Communications Minister insists that due process was followed in the MTN's payment negotiations. It's question time. Honorable Minister of Communications, Honorable Adebayo, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Question Time.
It's my very big pleasure for having me.
Now let's start from the recent controversy of the MTN 50 billion naira payments. Could you set the record straight on this, because it's important we put things in the right perspective?
Really, I don't see what is controversial in the fact that they had paid 50 billion. Remember, they were supposed to pay trillions, of a naira, having regard to the level or amount of violations. If I may recap, there had been existing and extant regulations that all operators, GSM operators, must ensure that their subscribers are registered, pre-registered, before they start being allowed to use, the telecommunication services of the operators. It so happened, unfortunately, that MTN in particular had about 5.2 million people who had not been registered. When this came into the open, particularly with the coming into office of the current executive vice chairman of NCC, he blew the thing open, and MTN was fined, money in accordance with the regulations. The MTN's reaction immediately was to accept that they had been in violation. Number two was to apologize for such violations. Number three was to commit themselves never to repeat such violations again. Number four was to ask for some reprieve from what was initially, to have been the fines.
When you say the NCC boss blew the whistle on the MTN failure to comply with the regulations of the NCC, does that suggest there has been a cover-up in the previous administration?
Well, I'm not insinuating, because I don't have evidence of whether it was maliciously done, whether it was done in bad faith, or whether it was an act of negligence. What is established is that for years, there were more than 5 million, GSM subscribers on MTN line who had not been registered and were using their phone lines against the clear guidelines of, the NCC to the operators. When the new man came, he blew it open and imposed a fine in accordance with the regulations, which says for every one unregistered SIM operation, the amount of 1,000 naira or thereabout was to be paid. So when it happened, the MTN officials, management, admitted that they were in violation. Secondly, they apologized for such violations. Thirdly, they committed themselves never to allow such violations to occur again on their system, on their operations. Fourthly, they asked for a review. And when it happened, I, as Minister of Communication, was not in office as at that time. So the NCC had to forward the request of MTN management to Mr. President. And Mr. President graciously allowed a waiver of about 25% of what MTN was supposed to have done. I was paid.
What exactly was MTN's prayer at the court?
Well, their prayer was that they were not in violation and that they were wrongly fined, as it were. That is, despite the fact that they have accepted that they were in violation and all of that. In any case, when they approached government for an out-of-court settlement, the Minister of Justice gave them two conditions for, any sort of out-of-court settlement. The first is that they should make a down payment of 50 billion naira and that they should also withdraw the case from court. They have now complied with those two preconditions, and it is my expectation that in the following weeks, negotiations will be on between MTN management and the federal government as represented by the Minister of Justice.
Wasn't it too hasty for the Attorney General to accept an out-of-court settlement?
He didn't ask them to withdraw the case. He is saying, look, you were the ones who take us to court. You are the ones who are now coming up with an application or a request for an out-of-court settlement. Before we can talk to you at all, take these two steps. He didn't force them to go to court, and he's not the one forcing them to withdraw from court. Of course, we were ready. We knew that whether they went to court or not, they had been in violation, and we knew that the court would support the steps taken by the NCC. So I don't see any fault in what he has done. It is part of the legal practice in this country that out-of-court settlements must be encouraged in all disputes between parties, whether between government and government or within government and private individuals or among private individuals. So what the Minister of Justice has done is perfectly in order, and it is in accordance with the ethics of the legal profession.
You can also join in this conversation by sending your comment on our various social media platforms showing on your screen. Coming up on Question Time, did the 50 billion naira payment by MTN to the federal government follow due process? Let's find out from the Minister of Communications, Adebayo, after the break. Don't go away.